So I wanted to ask you about those reports, and what do you think of those, some of those initial reports of babies being beheaded and babies being cut out of their mother's wombs?
Yeah. Yeah. Two things to say. There's a debate underway in the media, in the Western media, over whether babies were or were not beheaded. And it's a debate that we speak Hebrew, Israelis. We're not part of that conversation. We don't listen to it. Ever since Saturday, we don't care about it. We are profoundly, deeply unconnected to the world's debate about us. It appears, the facts as I understand them, and I understand them because I've been very closely following everything, and because I've seen some of the specific details and the footage, but the fact as I understand them was that we have roughly, 4 dozen babies. They're identified, but not everyone is yet found. There's some bodies. They set houses on fire. They came to houses, and many families, every home in Israel is required by the building codes to have a safe room that is a bomb shelter that is resistant to shells and that can be locked. And so families went into those safe rooms, and the Hamas fighters couldn't get into them, couldn't get them out. These safe rooms are impervious to rocket attacks, so they're also impervious to bullet fire. So they set the houses on fire to smoke them out. And so there are, dozens of burned bodies, and they include children. All of that is absolutely true. We have one video that I have seen of a man working very hard to chop off the head of an adult in one of the houses, and filming it and laughing and thinking it's a great fun. By the way, the adult was severely wounded, but not actually dead, while they were trying to chop his head off. And that's a video. You can find it on TikTok, on Twitter. If you can't find it, go to the pro Hamas Twitter. It'll be there. So there were beheadings. They seem to have been done humorously, done on the side. That the beheading wasn't part of the strategy of the great the fun. They basically ran through and shot every baby they could find in their cribs, and they did that dozens of times. One of the reporters who went through one of these villages, 15 different villages and towns were hit. One of these villages, one of the reporters went through and took that reports of the beheadings and these dead babies' bodies, including burned ones, which are also very disfigured, and said the sentence, they beheaded 40 babies. Now, we've been burying these babies. They're not 40 beheaded babies. That was just a mistake. And it was shock affecting, bleeding into how they spoke on live television. It wasn't more than that. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't true. It wasn't a lie in the sense that the intent wasn't to lie. That report is so horrifying that it was picked up and ran on social media. There were beheadings and there were mass murders of babies. Were there mass beheadings of babies? No. There is now a fight. It's been hard to be on social media for the last 5 days because too many people are engaging in deeply shallow and ridiculous ways with an atrocity. Journalists who think that the correction of how many babies are beheaded is the most fundamental and important thing and gone on a crusade about it are dehumanizing. Getting the story right is important. Making it your campaign, and by the way, you have other tweets there that are pretty sympathetic to Hamas, is not important. It's a different kind of lying. So anyway, that's what I have to say about it. I find it all grotesque. I find the whole debate about it grotesque. The story of the beheaded babies has made the rounds. President Biden said it, but then issued a correction. He was working off Israeli news reports that were already a day old. The Israeli news reports right now have corrected. There is a chance, and this is what we don't know yet, and I can't find out, basically because of the fog of wars you mentioned, that there are beheaded babies. That is not impossible. But if there are, then it's a handful. It's not 40. What the hell are we discussing? Mm-hmm. I'll give you that Hamas didn't literally it's hard to behead someone. There's a lot of bone, there's a lot of muscle. Should we get into this? That's a weird thing to get into. You don't want to slow down, so you don't behead, you shoot and you move on. Does that make them slightly better? Or does that prove that none of this happened, which is what some Hamas supporters, especially in Britain, have now launched? Mainstream people who talk to members of parliament, have launched a campaign that says, well, if that's a lie, then how do we know 260 people died at the festival? All those movies were Hamas movies. They were Hamas. It's a little, you only need to believe Hamas. You don't need to believe me, but they're going to launch this campaign.
Yeah.
Jews no longer wait for other people's opinion. So I couldn't give a fuck. I'm sorry. Can I say that on your show? I apologize.
Sure.
I cannot express how little I care about this discourse. It is not honest. It is not serious. It doesn't matter. It is literally a way to avoid the vastness of what happened. And by the way, the horrific suffering that is to come. This is also important to say. Hamas ran away after the massacre into Gaza. And Hamas in Gaza now has one strategy and one strategy only, and it literally has no other strategy. And that is to hide underneath the civilian population of Gaza. There isn't some other way Hamas is going to fight us. There isn't some other way Hamas is going to survive this. And so it is making us, if we need to get Hamas, and we need to get Hamas, it is no longer a question. It is making us reach through Gaza's civilian population to pull them out. Their first crime against humanity was committed on Jews, and their second crime against humanity is being committed to Palestinians. And it's being committed now by the fact that they're hiding under, literally in the tunnels underneath cities. And we will get them out because we don't accept that there's some kind of pretend international law that says that you can be invincible as long as you put human babies on top of you. That is not international law, even if some professors who don't like Israel anyway pretend that that's international law. We will drag them out and we will rescue Gaza from Hamas. I talked to a Palestinian friend. Well, I don't know if he'd call himself a friend. We've debated the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He does not like Israel, but we do have a respect for each other. I talked to him on Monday, I think it was. And he said to me, there was already airstrikes beginning in Gaza. And he said to me, you're committing a crime in Gaza, but you're going to commit a bigger crime. The bigger crime is that after Gaza's civilians pay all the price of you going after Hamas, you're not going to finish the job. He thinks Israel is a terrible thing and he wishes Israel disappeared. But get Hamas out of there. That is something that you hear from almost all Palestinians you talk to. So these people in America and in Britain and in Paris who scream that this is decolonization and this is glory and this is resistance, they don't represent Palestinians. Hamas is the devastation of Palestine. If you support Palestinians, if you want to boycott Israel and pressure Israel and squeeze Israel because you think it's bad and wrong toward Palestinians, your number one obstacle is Hamas. Hamas keeps undermining you. You want to really squeeze us? Get rid of Hamas, then come after us and it'll actually work.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about another one of these paradigms. Gilad Shalit, I'm sure, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
It's Gilad Shalit. Yeah.
Captured in 2006, held for over 5 years in exchange for, was it 1,000 prisoners? But that
12, almost 1,200 or 1,100. Yeah.
So that model of hostages for prisoners, does that shift going forward? Is that one of the paradigms or one of the tolerances that has essentially existed for the last decade plus? Has that been shattered?
Yeah, absolutely. Hamas took 200 hostages and therefore changed how we think about hostages. We will give 1,100 people, including mass murderers with blood on their hands, who had to get a special pardon to get out of prison. It wasn't some kind of thing that could easily be done by the government. We had to hand those over for Gilad Shalit, and it was worth it. I supported it at the time. I wrote in support of it. I want to say that. In other words, it's Netanyahu did it. There was a lot of criticism of him. I wrote in support of it. But by getting Gilad Shalit back, and by the way, he is among us. Please forgive me, Gilad, if you hear this. I want to say something that isn't personal about you. But by paying that price for Gilad Shalit, now we have 200 Gilad Shalits, and some of them are little babies. And so Hamas has now made it no longer worthwhile for us to do this. It has made hostages irrelevant. And so we are as enraged as you would be if they took your children, but also unwilling to negotiate because it went too far. It gives us, we have nothing to lose. And so those hostages may not be rescued. I sure hope so. I have slept 2 hours every night for the last 5 nights. Working on this, I'm in a group of more than 100 volunteers who have been sleepless and working on this one family, and there are dozens of families. But we will burn a path to their door. What they do to those hostages will determine, I don't know how to put it, how they die. But this will never happen again. There's no other, it's hard to explain what it feels like to be Israeli right now.
Yeah.
Those 200 hostages, how they were taken, how women with blood coming out of their crotches were paraded through the streets of Gaza. This is not something that Hamas has determined its fate. They earned it. They really did a good job on that one.
Yeah. Now, money going into Gaza from the United States, from Europe, from Iran, and set funding sources, both above board and illicit. What did that look like, and what does that look like today? And how much did humanitarian aid enable this attack?
Yeah, there is criticism of this. There's a lot of, especially European aid money. There's a lot of American aid money to an organization called UNRWA, which is a branch of the UN, and a huge debate and discussion, and it gets very deep and very complicated. I hesitate to criticize either the Biden administration sort of renewing some of the aid to UNRWA or the German government, funding through the EU a lot of this aid. And the reason I hesitate to criticize is that this was the Israeli strategy. For the last about 15 years, the Israeli government has thought that you can essentially buy stability with its aid money. And so it hasn't just been okay with American funding for UNRWA, German funding for a lot of these aid organizations. It's actually allowed Qatar, which is a pro-Hamas regime, to send monthly deliveries of $20 million in cash into the Strip as a way to stabilize Hamas, because a stable Hamas is a stable southern border. This was the Israeli concept. So, Americans are having this debate now. Did the Biden administration act unwisely? Was it very foolish? Was it this and that? I personally believe that, yes, the answer is the entirety of the West, the way it has been funding Palestinians, has in various ways been exploited by bad actors on the ground among Palestinians, especially Hamas, in ways that I don't think anyone in the West wants. But Israel not only wanted it, Israel did it itself. And so we are in no position to bring that complaint before the governments of the world. It won't be how things work going forward. Everyone understands that. And both, the German Chancellor, President Biden, they have come out for us in ways that we did not expect. And that are absolutely astonishing, and so there's a huge amount of criticism, and looking back and thinking carefully about how that all went down. But I don't think that an Israeli has a right now to complain about that, because it was Israel's policy.